Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. This is your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in the heart of downtown Wayne. We like to interview people who are doing really important things in the community, whether it's academia, whether it's medicine, whether it's architecture, whether they're Pulitzer Prize-winning novelists. And today we have a very interesting person. His name is Dr. Daniel Schidlow. That's an MD and a lot of other things after his name. And he's the Annenberg Dean of the College of Medicine at Drexel University. Welcome to the studio.
Well, thank you very much for having me here.
And I know as dynamic as you are not the energy force behind the recent volcanic action in Chile, which is your native country. Is that true?
Correct. I may have a lot of energy, but volcanic energy is not one that I can claim.
On the serious side, do you have relatives still in Chile?
My relatives, which are my parents, are deceased. But when people ask me about, there was an earthquake in Chile, do you have relatives? I say yes. And they ask me, how are they? I say pretty shook up because they are obviously 6 feet under.
Oh.
It's a bad joke, but it works. I have you laughing here.
Do you have cousins or any?
No, my family was the only one that ended up down in South America. They arrived in Bolivia first.
Did they escape from Europe?
They escaped from Germany in 1939
Ooh.
and arrived in Bolivia, and from Bolivia they went down to Chile. And my grandfather, paternal grandfather, and his second wife remained in Bolivia where they died, and they're buried there. And a sister of my father ended up in Brazil after leaving Bolivia. So it's a not that unusual story for immigrants of that era.
Now, how long have you been the dean, the Annenberg Dean of the Drexel University College of Medicine?
I became the interim dean in November of 2011, and I became the appointed dean July 1st, 2012. So it's going on, I count everything, so it's about 3.5 years.
And before that, you were also very important in the whole medical system in the Philadelphia region.
Well, thank you. Probably I saw myself in a more humble way, but at the time that I became the dean, I was the chairman of the Department of Pediatrics of Drexel University College of Medicine, and I was the physician-in-chief of St. Christopher's Hospital for Children in North Philadelphia.
What brought you to Philadelphia from Chile?
Well, I came first to New York, where I spent 2 years doing a residency in pediatrics, and I met my wife. And then I came to Philadelphia to train in pediatric pulmonary diseases in children. I mean, pediatrics, of course.
What attracted you to pediatrics when there's a whole range of medical choices you could have made?
I love children. I love children as patients, as people. And I have this proclivity to wanting to take care of families as part of the taking care of children. So for me, it was an easy choice. I started out in internal medicine, and I liked the discipline and the science, but I missed really dealing with children. So that's how I ended up switching to pediatrics.
It's difficult to deal with children because you can't deal with the kids without dealing with the parents. And sometimes the parents are very difficult. I wouldn't know personally, but.
You know, I know that people say they're very difficult parents. And the issue really is that when you have a sick child, you become very anxious and you don't understand what's going on. So I think the role of pediatricians or pediatric subspecialists is to truly put themselves in the place of the parents and try to help assuage all the fears and answer all the questions. And it leads to very wonderful relationships that last a lifetime.
And the fact that you have a wonderful sense of humor that comes into play with dealing with children, I would assume.
Well, if you say so. I have a sense of humor. I don't think we should take ourselves too seriously, whether as professionals or as people. I used to say, well, we take what we do very seriously, but we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously.
Where did you get your training as a physician? Where did you go to university?
I tell everybody that I did, so they have to believe me. But I went to medical school at the University of Chile in Santiago, and from there I did a year of residency in internal medicine and a year in pediatrics. And they were very difficult years in the history of the country, and the medical training was very difficult because it was interrupted and because of the political situation. So I decided to come to the United States to gain training in a formal and organized way.
Because the United States often does not even recognize degrees from other countries. People have to like start over.
Well, you have to take certain tests and pass those tests to show that you're proficient in English, first of all. And
how did you learn English?
Well, I grew up with 2 languages at home, and then...
Your parents spoke English?
No, my parents spoke German, which made it actually easier for me to learn English. And then I studied English in school, and then I even took additional English classes to improve my vocabulary and my knowledge of the language.
And your first language was Spanish?
My first language was Spanish. My second language was German.
What about Yiddish?
And a little bit of Yiddish. My father particularly knew how to speak Yiddish. My mother knew a little bit, less than he did. And so I learned English and some French in school, and I learned Hebrew because it was a Hebrew day school.
So many languages. Ooh.
Well,
that's useful in your practice because you must see people from all different backgrounds.
It's always been very helpful, particularly Spanish.
Yes.
Because when I came to the United States, I worked in the Bronx first, where there's a very big Puerto Rican, particularly Puerto Rican, but also Dominican population. And then in North Philadelphia, certainly.
Yes.
And these days, actually, there are lots of Spanish-speaking people from everywhere in Latin America and Spain who live in the United States, and so it's helpful. Patients and their parents and families feel comforted, and sometimes they can explain themselves in their own language.
Well, it always helps when they have somebody who speaks their native language, and it gives them confidence that they don't have ordinarily. You know, if there are barriers because somebody can't express in English what it is they're dealing with, it's a shame.
That's true, and as a result, actually, I accumulated, so to speak, a relatively large following of Spanish-speaking patients because I didn't need an interpreter, and in general, I found that interpreters had some problems with expressing exactly what was going on medically and otherwise. So it helped to create a more direct relationship with the patients and the families.
In case you're wondering who Dr. Daniel Schidlow is, if you look at the most recent issue of Philadelphia Magazine, on page 89, there's a column that says, "Show me the money." And it says, quote, 5 of Philly's top healthcare minds tell how they'd allocate $100 million in research funds if it fell into their laps. And right in the middle of the column is a picture of Daniel Schidlow, the Dean of Drexel University's College of Medicine. And he came up with a very interesting answer. Do you want to read what your answer is, or should I read it?
You should read it because you don't have an accent like I do.
Do you have an accent? I didn't notice.
Oh, yes.
He said, I would address antimicrobial resistance, the loss of effectiveness of drugs that treat bacterial, viral, parasitic, and fungal infections. AMR, I guess that's short for antimicrobial resistance.
Correct.
Oh, that's a tongueful. Has emerged as a worldwide threat to the treatment of major causes of death: malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, and causes significant damage to economic development and sustainability. Now, it sounds as if you were looking outside the United States for these things.
I'm looking everywhere. For instance, people may be familiar with resistant staphylococcal infection that can be acquired particularly in hospitals. It's
Yes.
can be a devastating disease, very difficult to treat because the microbe is multi-resistant, and it's very difficult to find drugs to treat it. During my practice of pediatric respiratory diseases, I treated many patients with cystic fibrosis, and they could acquire multi-resistant organisms, which made treatment very difficult and made their prognosis worse. So I've been sensitized, let me put it that way, throughout my own career to the issue of antibiotic resistance in microorganisms. For instance, also worldwide, tuberculosis drugs, many of them have become ineffectual in treating tuberculosis because of resistance.
Ooh.
Now, when you said, well, you're looking at the world in general, the point is the world has become much smaller when it comes to infections.
It's true with people on airplanes back and forth all the
Absolutely.
time, and people doing volunteer work in,
Everywhere.
shall we say, underserved parts of the world, especially Africa.
You can say underserved. If you look at the issue with the recent epidemic of Ebola virus, you know, the virus in itself is less problematic than the lack of means to treat the patients with supportive services that we have here developed. But resistance to antimicrobial, antiviral, and other drugs is a real issue all over the world. And, well, it may take just one individual who arrives, let's say, in the United States.
Oh, the measles epidemic recently. Somebody was on a plane, landed in California, and all of a sudden they had all these measles cases. We thought we had wiped out measles, right?
Well, that's because lack of immunization. In some countries, interestingly, it is legally impossible not to immunize your children. Or let me put it in the positive. It is enforced by law. It's a legal requirement to immunize your children. And there are very, very few exceptions, which are usually medically indicated. In this country, people exercise the right, or the so-called right, not to do it, even if by doing so, they imperil the lives of others.
And their own children.
And their own children, but people have very definitive ideas as to why they would or would not immunize.
Well, you've got the medical background. You have the experience. So you can help put to rest the myth that people claim that when their kid got immunized against measles or whatever, they had autism.
That myth was debunked some time ago, and by people who know a lot more about the subject than I do. I'm not certainly a specialist in autism. I think autism is increasingly recognized and diagnosed, and whether it's more prevalent or it's just being recognized more, I couldn't really tell you for sure. But the relationship and the connection between autism and vaccination does not exist. The initial reports that came from the United Kingdom are now believed to have been incorrect or manufactured. So I think that there may be many causes for autism, but the connection between vaccination and autism appears not to be real.
Well, thank you for saying that again. I don't think we can say that often enough and remind people they need to have their kids immunized against diseases that we thought had been wiped out decades ago.
Well, particularly if you see a child dying of one of these diseases that are totally preventable, it comes to mind the fact that parental choices of that nature can result in really even fatal consequences for their children, and brings to the forefront also another issue, which is what are the rights of children versus the rights of parents when it comes to that kind of an issue where their life is in danger. And this is something that is an ethical dilemma that many times confronts health professionals.
That's very interesting. I never thought of looking at it from the child's point of view. I was only looking at these parents and thinking, how could they believe that nonsense, that something that will prevent illness and save lives could cause autism? Because they don't know what causes autism.
Well, you know, I don't criticize parents in that manner because
I'm free to do it because I'm an opinion writer. So
and you have strong opinions
very
usually.
strong,
Very
yes.
strong. Right, that's right. That's why I like you. You know, we got along fine. I do have strong opinions. However, I really try to understand what people's anxieties and concerns are. And one of the worst things that can happen to a parent, I believe, is when they have a child whose disease is mysterious and they don't know the answer of why, and so speculation takes place. The issue at hand, which I just mentioned, is parents may say, well, we brought this child into the world, so we have the right to decide what's best for the child. I agree with that to a point, to the point where the health of the child is not imperiled. Because then I think that as a society, we have a duty to protect the child.
Do you have time, being the dean and administering everything you have to do and raising money for Drexel University and the College of Medicine, do you have time to see any patients? Do you still...
I infrequently go to our adult cystic fibrosis clinic. We have a wonderful adult cystic fibrosis program.
They live to be adults now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's more of an adult disease now because of all the advances in therapy. So at Drexel, we have a wonderful adult cystic fibrosis program, and several of the patients were my patients as children. So I enjoy very much seeing them and speaking with them, seeing where they are in their lives. And I participate in the care of a few, particularly those who I am closest to and who still from time to time ask my opinion. I mean, that's why I was telling you before that to deal with patients and families, unlike what many people think that parents are difficult, is a tremendous opportunity to create lifelong relationships. And I have patients out there who are 40 years old and pick up the phone and say, you know, I know you haven't seen me in 15 years or 20 years, but you know, this is what people are telling me. What do you think? I also follow people who, for instance, have had lung transplantations and are, because of that, are alive and doing well. And I'm interested in their lives. I mean, they're already part of my extended family to an extent. And finally, many of my patients are having children, which wasn't something that was
wasn't in the
possible
cards.
and wasn't in the cards. And so I'm very proud of what I call my cystic fibrosis grandchildren, because they're a source of joy for their parents and truly a source of great pleasure for me.
I don't know if you ever had the privilege and the opportunity to meet Dr. Billy Graub, who founded the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. He was my kid's pediatrician. And he, before they even knew how to diagnose cystic fibrosis, lost 2 of his children, although the second child, Kathy, whom I knew, lived to be 18, and they took her everywhere with the oxygen tent, with everything, but they took her all around the world. They took her to Israel, and she was about to start college, unfortunately, when she did not survive. The surviving child, Pearl, is wonderful and carries on her parents' legacy.
Well, let me say that not only did I know Billy Graub and Evelyn, and I know Pearl, and I know her family, and actually my daughter and her daughter were together in preschool. I was honored a couple of years ago to receive the first Milton Graub Award for service to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which was presented to me by Pearl, who was Billy Graub's daughter. So for me, that was a tremendous honor and a source of great satisfaction.
I didn't know Dr. Schidlow at the time because I met him recently. He mentioned the word autism. Well, I met him when he was over at the Arc of Philadelphia. Talk about this wonderful program you have for your med school students, and I think it's the only one in the country right now.
Well, we pride ourselves at Drexel University to aim at being the most civically engaged university in the country.
That's what John Fry, your president,
Absolutely.
always reminds people.
Absolutely. And likewise, I would like to say that we should be the most civically engaged medical school in the country. Our students are very socially conscious and very committed to social causes. So what we did at the ARC is we have one of several free clinics that are organized and to a great extent staffed by medical students who give of their time and their effort to improve the lives of the people who are at the ARC, who are largely people with
intellectual disability,
intellectual and some physical
disabilities as well.
And to me, that's a wonderful thing because while at St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, I witnessed the efforts of some of my colleagues who established a program for special children, and it's called That Way. And what it is, it's a program aimed at treating children who have special needs, and that includes anywhere from intellectual disabilities to severe physical disabilities, children who cannot breathe on their own and have to be hooked to ventilators to be able to breathe, and all sorts of issues like that. And the physicians, nurses, and other health professionals who work in that clinic are absolutely models of generosity, personal commitment, and civic engagement.
And compassion.
Absolutely. Care. You know that I say that there are 4 things that define good medicine. All right? So I know you like these kinds of things. So the 4 C's, they're C's.
4 C's.
The first C is caring. And I don't use compassion because I believe that caring has more of an active hue to it, you see, because you can be very compassionate and do nothing about it, but when you care, you actually do something about that feeling of compassion that you have.
Well, care is also a verb.
It's a verb, that's right.
That's why you like it.
Because it implies action. The second one is competence. You have to know what you're doing, right? You can be very compassionate, but if you don't have the knowledge, you will not do well by the patients, right?
Right.
The third one is critical thinking. And critical thinking is absolutely crucial. You cannot many times to make a diagnosis just take things at face value. You have to dig deeper. You have to look at things that may not look quite right and try to find, what is behind what you're seeing. So for that, you need critical thinking. And the last one is very important, is the least common of all senses. You know which one that is? Common sense.
Oh, okay.
Common sense is what is lacking in many people. And you have to have common sense. You have to realize what is common and what is uncommon, and what could be the case with the individual that you're attending to. So I call it my 4 C's of
Let me
good
see if
medicine.
I got them. Caring, competence, critical thinking, and common sense. I passed. I got it.
You passed that. You passed that. That applies to lots of things,
That's
as
true.
you can possibly imagine.
We can't talk about, excuse me, about Drexel University's College of Medicine without talking about former Governor Ed Rendell, because when Hahnemann Hospital, the precursor, it's still called Hahnemann, isn't it? I don't know.
The hospital is called Hahnemann.
Yes. When Hahnemann was going down the tubes, Ed Rendell collared then president, the late Papadakis, and said, "You will take over Hahnemann Hospital and the medical school, blah, blah, blah." And that's how he saved it, right?
Well, I don't know that Rendell told Taki Papadakis what to do. I find that slightly difficult to believe.
He might have suggested.
But what I do know is that Taki Papadakis was not only a highly energetic and creative leader, he was also a man of vision. And he understood that although this situation was very difficult, for Drexel to essentially subsume into its bosom a medical school would result in an enhancement of Drexel's standing as a university, because a good research university in general needs to have a medical school attached to it. That's not true for everybody, but certainly if you look at what the medical school has brought to Drexel, we bring a significant amount of research to the university.
And research grants.
And research grants. But also, we are very privileged to be part of a larger university and be able to collaborate with people in the university. So, in a way, we leverage each other. And Taki Papadakis and his board saw that and took a risk. The risk was, I don't know whether you know this, but the risk was minimized some by creating what was called a firewall around the College of Medicine. And for the better part of, at least a dozen years, the medical school operated under the moniker of Philadelphia Health Education and Research Corporation, Health and Education Corporation, FEC. And it was a way to keep, potential untoward issues in the medical school from touching Drexel. Last year, July, President Fry, after a period of time of preparation, officially did away with the firewall, and today Drexel University College of Medicine is an integral part of Drexel University.
And how many med school students do you currently have enrolled?
We have 260 medical students per year, so we have a total of about 1,100 take or leave, and we also have another about 1,000 students, PhD students, master's degree students, because we have a graduate school within our school. We have a graduate school of biomedical science and professional studies.
Okay.
We have a very large pre-med program.
Our guest this week has been Dr. Daniel Schidlow, who holds the title of the Annenberg Dean of the College of Medicine at Drexel University. There are a lot of other things. I have to have you back again because there are so many topics that we didn't have a chance to cover. But thank you so much, Dr. Schidlow. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Bonnie, for inviting me. It was a pleasure for me, too. And I'll be back anytime you say so, because you are used to people doing what you say they should do.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.